You don't need motivation, you need a cold decision. Have you ever seen the person you used to be staring back at you from behind the mirror? A version once filled with ambition, who swore tomorrow will be different, who told themselves just a little more motivation, but that tomorrow never came. Not because you were weak, but because you were still waiting for some external wind to move you forward while standing still in the quiet zone of your own life. We often mistake change as something that arrives when inspiration knocks, that we must feel ready before we begin. But readiness is an illusion, and inspiration, if it comes, is merely a passing guest. The one who truly changes their life isn't waiting for light, but stands up quietly in the dark, with empty hands and a cold resolve. That's what Marcus Aurelius deeply understood when he wrote, "Don't waste time wondering what it means to be good, just be one." In this video, we won't talk about magical breakthroughs or miracle formulas to change your life. We'll dive deeper, to where discipline is built through repeated action, where silence is the beginning of strength, and where your character is not shaped by emotion, but by the choices you repeat every day. And you'll see, it's precisely when you don't want to act, but still do, that you're building something no one can take from you: inner strength. 1. Action is the starting point, not the reward. You don't need a special occasion to begin. No birthdays, no new year, no nod from someone else, no milestone to signal a turning point. Life doesn't print a start date on the calendar. And you, if you're still waiting for a clear sign from the outside, may not yet understand this. Action has never been the result of readiness, but the proof of self-mastery. Some people spend their whole lives waiting. They gather ideas, desires, ambitions, and call it a plan. But they forget this. No intention becomes reality without a single step. They think inspiration will get them started. But inspiration is just another emotion, and emotions shift and sway. You might be on fire in the morning and full of doubt by night. And so they live inside a cycle of tomorrows that never arrive. We've been trained to worship outcomes, to glorify achievement, and in doing so, we unconsciously treat action as a reward for some stable inner state. But here's the paradox. The ones who get the most done are often those who begin from emptiness with no inspiration, no clarity, no applause, just one solitary decision. The decision to rise, to do one small thing, to repeat it, even when the mind is chaotic, even when the body is tired, even when no one is watching. They don't wait for the right feeling to act, they act to correct their feelings. There is a quiet kind of power born in the moment you force yourself to do the right thing, even when every cell in your body wants to quit. It isn't as flashy as victory. It isn't as grand as success, but it's the only thing capable of reshaping who you are. Action, in its purest form, is not a reward for the ready, but the starting point for the one who dares to step into unpreparedness and master it inch by inch. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to praise himself. He wrote to pull himself out of stagnation, to remind himself that, as a human being, you are made to act, not to justify why you haven't started. People like him don't need cheerleaders. They ignite the fire from within, from their own dissatisfaction with delay, from observing the repetition of unchangedness. And then they don't try to create change. They become the change the moment they act, without needing a beautiful reason. You could wait another day. You could scroll through a few more videos looking for inspiration. You could draft a more perfect plan. But you also know, all you really need is one action, any action with intention, with purpose, with commitment. No one begins a long journey with a giant leap. They begin with one small step, immediate, unprepared, without fanfare. And in that quiet step, a new life begins to stir. Anyone can talk about what they'll do, but very few can do it silently, even while filled with doubt. That's the difference between dreamers and doers. One waits for inspiration to reach the finish line. The other walks and lets inspiration chase them. If you're truly serious about change, do something even if you feel nothing changing, because change doesn't begin with certainty. It begins with an imperfect step repeated long enough. 2. Discipline is not confinement, it is liberation. We grow up in a society that teaches us freedom is doing whatever we want, living without limits, obeying no one. But that's a beautiful illusion, packaged by indulgence. True freedom is not doing everything you want, but doing what must be done, even when you don't want to. The emotionally driven see discipline as a prison. The self-aware see it as the key that unlocks a bigger one, the prison of instinct, mood, and delay. You can choose to live by emotion, waking each day as a blank slate, with no direction, no system, no form. You might call that creativity, but you'll quickly realize creativity doesn't thrive in chaos. It is born in limits, in structure, in repeated discipline. When you do something again and again, at the same time, in the same way you create space for brilliance. The weak believe discipline is submission. The strong know that submitting to impulse is the only true surrender, and mastery over it is the only true control. There is a terrifying silence in the life of someone without discipline. It's the silence you hear when facing yourself and realizing you know exactly what must be done, but don't do it. No one punishes you, no one scolds you, but you feel small in your own eyes. Because you're witnessing your weakness each time you break a promise, delay a task, or give in to a fleeting feeling at the cost of a lasting principle. Discipline doesn't demand you become a machine. It only asks that you recognize there are things worth doing even when you don't want to. Times you must rise even when it's cold and your body aches. Tasks you must finish even when no one is watching and no one is waiting. And in those moments you're forging an invisible armor. You can't see it, but it's there. And one day, it will be the very thing that holds you upright when the world around you collapses. The undisciplined must constantly negotiate with themselves. Every morning is a bargain, every task a dilemma, every choice a gamble with their feelings. But the disciplined don't negotiate. They made the decision long before. They don't ask, "Do I feel inspired today?" They ask, "What must I do, regardless of how I feel?" And that question frees them from the mental fatigue that drains so many with big dreams but no structure to carry them. You won't need poetic words to keep yourself moving. You won't need to binge motivational video at night, because you'll have something stronger. A schedule you don't break, a system you don't betray, a standard you don't lower, whether someone's watching or not. Discipline doesn't bind you to rules, it frees you from the chaos of mood swings, of whims that shift like weather, of endless days that end in nothing. And when you live like that long enough, you no longer see discipline as sacrifice. You see it as clarity, as the highest form of self-respect, as your quiet way of telling the world, "I am not enslaved by what I feel. I am loyal to what I've chosen to live by." 3. Self-respect doesn't come from words, but from keeping promises to yourself. Some people speak beautifully about self-love. They repeat mantras. You must appreciate yourself, be kind to yourself, forgive yourself for being weak. But the truth is, you cannot love someone you no longer respect. And respect, it doesn't come from words. It comes from the moments you make a promise to yourself and keep it. From the mornings you don't want to rise but do. From the tasks you dread but complete. From the days you're exhausted but still honor your commitments. Self-respect isn't a feeling, it's the result of action. You don't need to always feel confident, strong, or motivated. But if you behave like someone reliable, act like someone principled, keep your word like someone with honor, respect will grow in you quietly, like a habit. And one day, you won't need to tell yourself, I deserve good things. You'll know it without saying a word, because you've lived that way. Emotions lie easily, but actions don't. Action is the only way to test the sincerity you hold for yourself. You can stand before the mirror, repeat 100 affirmations every morning, but if by nightfall you've broken the promise you made to yourself, that reflection in the mirror will grow cold. It won't scold you, it won't speak, but in its silence, you'll know you just lost a little trust in yourself. There is a shame that no one else sees. It's the shame of breaking so many promises to yourself that, over time, you no longer dare to make any. You play it safe. You speak less. You set smaller goals, not because you're humble, but because you're afraid to fail again. And in that fear, you shrink into a muted version of yourself, not for anyone else, but because you no longer trust yourself. Self-respect needs no one's approval. It only needs your consistency. And each day, life gives you countless chances to earn it, to do or not to do, to follow through or to surrender, to persist or to delay. These small, unseen choices, the ones no one notices or remembers, form the silent foundation of the trust you build with yourself. One kept promise is a stone. 50 kept promises, a fortress. One broken promise, a crack. And if you ignore enough cracks, the fortress will fall. You can master every skill for success. But if you fail to master the art of keeping promises to yourself, everything else is just decoration, because one day, when there's no one left around, no witnesses, no external rewards, the only thing you'll have left is the ability to look yourself in the eye and not look away. That ability isn't born. It's built in every small action you take when no one is watching. And in that silence, self-respect is either forged or worn away. 4. Don't chase intensity. Choose consistency. Modern people are easily drawn to what is explosive. They glorify sprints, sleepless nights of inspiration, frenzied efforts in a single moment only to quickly burn out. They mistake speed and force for proximity to success. But what kills a journey has never been a lack of intensity, it's always been a lack of consistency. People often start with fire, then quit in silence. Not because they lack talent, but because they don't have a system to carry them when inspiration fades. You might sprint fast in one day, but if you can't walk steadily for a year, you won't go far. Progress doesn't need constant breakthroughs. It needs a steady rhythm like the marching drums of a battalion moving through fog. It's not brilliance, it's endurance. Not a blazing flash, but a light that doesn't go out. No one notices that kind of rhythm each day. But you, repeating seemingly meaningless acts, are taking the steps that the noisy ones will never reach. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Stop debating what a good person should be, just be one." No proclamations, no announcements, no need to shake the world. Just do the right things, day after day, until they become your nature. Consistency is the strongest moral foundation because it doesn't rely on mood, doesn't need supervision, and doesn't change with emotion. It's a decision reaffirmed quietly, every day. Those who chase intensity often don't realize that how they begin becomes the reason they quit. When you push too hard, too fast, you drag yourself into cycles of euphoria and exhaustion. It's a form of emotional addiction no different than dopamine dependence. You crave the thrill, the fire, the feeling of pushing limits. Then when that feeling disappears, you no longer want to do anything. And so, you live off motivation instead of principle. Meanwhile, those who understand the value of consistency don't need storms. They work like farmers sowing seeds, on time, in place, repeated, with no demand for instant results. They know nothing worthwhile grows overnight. They don't need explosions, they need rhythm. And in that rhythm, every small habit becomes an essential part of their life's architecture. Consistency earns no applause, no spotlight. No one waits at the finish line to hand you a medal for doing what you had to do on an ordinary day. But that's what makes it the most noble kind of glory. A trustworthy person, someone others can rely on. Someone who knows where they're going and keeps walking, even when no one's watching. You don't need a sprint. You need a reason that's clear, a plan that's simple, and a commitment strong enough to repeat it even on the days that feel dull, tiring, meaningless. Because it's in those days, when you keep going, that you pass the point where most people quit. And in that space you begin becoming the person you once only imagined. 5. Pain is evolution in progress. Some pain arrives without warning, without reason, without any logic to explain it. You wake up one morning and feel something inside you is no longer whole. Something broke quietly, without a sound, but you can feel it's no longer the you from yesterday. This pain doesn't scream. It seeps inwards, like acid dripping onto stone, slow, eroding, patient. We often try to escape pain. We run to whatever makes us forget, a movie, a person, an addiction, a drink, a nap. But no one can run forever. Because pain isn't an external object to dodge, it's an internal signal. And every time you are deeply hurt, something within you is shattered, not to be destroyed, but to be rebuilt into something stronger. Seneca once wrote, "No one becomes strong without being wounded." And it's true, real resilience is forged in the grind, then the rise. Just as muscles must tear to grow, willpower must endure suffering to become solid. Pain is not a sign of failure. It's life being reborn. It's proof that you're crossing a threshold where your old self no longer fits, and a new version is slowly forming from the ashes of experience. What breaks people isn't pain, it's how they see it. When you see it as punishment, you resist. When you see it as failure, you shrink. But when you begin to view it as a living curriculum, a lesson carved into your skin, a harsh but honest trainer, you change your entire relationship with suffering. You stop wishing it away. You ask, what am I being trained for here? And in that question, you step into the realm of real growth. Some wounds never fade, but they don't have to be burdens. They are badges. Proof that you walked through fire and lived. And sometimes, the quietest people are those who felt the most pain, but they don't complain. They understand. Pain didn't make them weaker. It only made them quieter and sharper. The world teaches you to avoid, forget, or move on as fast as you can. But Stoic philosophy teaches you, walk into the pain and sit with it. Don't try to conquer it. Don't try to flee. Witness it as part of your rebirth, because it's precisely in the moment you endure the unbearable that you realize you've crossed the limits of your former self and there's no going back. You don't have to love pain, but you must learn to pass through it without betraying yourself. And if you can do that quietly, without showing off, you'll emerge with a strength nothing can imitate. A strength not born from luck, not from talent, but from the cracks inside you where the light finally broke through. 6. Your system saves you when inspiration leaves. Some mornings you wake up with a blank mind. No inspiration, no drive, no clear reason. Just a vague quietness, where the goals that felt bright yesterday now seem gray. In those moments, most people will delay. They'll tell themselves to rest for a day, then another. And by the time they want to return, they've lost the one thing that could carry them forward: momentum. Inspiration is a fickle guest. It shows up when you least expect it and vanishes when you need it most. Living by inspiration is like depending on the weather to decide if you'll leave the house. You'll never be proactive. You'll always be waiting, and those who live like that, no matter how many dreams they hold, are giving away control to something they can't control. The difference between those who go far and those who stay stuck isn't who feels more positive emotion, it's who has the better system. A simple system, a set of behaviors you design, repeat, and bind yourself to, regardless of how you feel. It doesn't need motivation to run. It just needs you to be clear on what's essential and conscious enough not to negotiate with yourself every day. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is right, do it. If it is true, say it." There's no room here for emotional hesitation. He didn't care whether you were tired, confused, or uninspired. He only cared about action, right action, repeated, consistent. And that's the spirit you need when emptiness lingers. Your system is how you protect yourself from your weaker selves. It's the track that keeps the train moving even when the conductor is drowsy. When you have a system, you don't have to redecide each morning whether to work, exercise, write, or read. You decided long ago, and how you feel doesn't change that commitment. Successful people aren't always on fire. They've just simplified life into unbreakable rhythms. They don't need to win the war with their mood every day. They just need to show up, do the work, on time, repeat until it becomes instinct. A system doesn't take away your freedom. It removes the burden of hesitation. It keeps your direction clear when everything inside you wants to wander. No one sees the system behind your results. No one claps for going to bed on time, writing 500 words uninspired, or cleaning your desk each morning. But those tiny actions, they are the invisible framework that holds you when your mind begins to unravel. And when you fall, your system is the first thing to lift you without anyone's help. 7. All or nothing, the trap of procrastination. There is a subtle trap many fall into without even realizing it. It's the trap of perfection. The trap behind phrases like, "If I can't do it perfectly, I won't do it at all." It sounds like a high standard, like an admirable ideal, but in reality, it's the most sophisticated way to delay action without feeling guilty. Because you're not lazy, you're just waiting for the perfect moment. We've been taught to chase greatness, to live by an all-or-nothing philosophy. But that mindset is what keeps you stuck. Because most things worth doing will always begin awkward, incomplete, and imperfect. If you can't accept being not good enough at the start, you'll never go far enough to get better. And soon you'll find yourself trapped in a loop of plans that never start just because you're afraid to begin in a flawed way. Stoicism never told you to wait until things are ripe before acting. It teaches you to live within current conditions, using what you have, where you are, doing what you can. Epictetus said clearly, "Don't seek for everything to happen as you wish it would, but rather wish that everything happens as it does, and you'll find peace." In that spirit, beginning something even when small, imperfect, or mistimed is the highest form of initiative. Not because you're ready, but because you refuse to live one more day in a state of waiting. Those stuck in the all-or-nothing trap always think value lies in grand results. But the truth is, value lies in accumulation. Every small act you complete today, no matter how flawed, is a brick. And those bricks, if placed steadily, build a structure far stronger than the beautiful dreams you never touch. On the other hand, those who keep waiting for ideal conditions will build sandcastles full of ideas, but with no foundation. You don't need a perfect day to write a few lines. You don't need a quiet studio to focus. You don't need full energy to start your workout. What you need is the courage to do something small right now instead of waiting for the perfect version of yourself who may never arrive. Because the longer you wait, the more you disconnect from your ability to live authentically. And at some point, you're not just postponing a task, you're postponing your entire life. The all-or-nothing trap is a perfect disguise for fear of failure. It gives you a reason not to act while still feeling principled. But each time you avoid action for the sake of perfection, you're trading the strength of real progress for the temporary comfort of a dream you don't have to face. And you'll never feel good enough unless you first accept being not good yet. You don't need a breakthrough. You just need to write a first sentence. Do one push-up, clear a corner of your desk, close one browser tab, shut down one excuse. Because the moment you do even the smallest thing, you break the cycle. You're no longer waiting for inspiration. You've chosen action, and that right there is the first victory most people never achieve. 8. Every action redefines who you are. We often think identity is fixed, a permanent definition of who I am, shaped by the past, by personality, by what we've done before. But the truth is, you are not your past. You are what you're doing right now, and every action, no matter how small, is rewriting the lines that define the person you're becoming. You may have once been someone who was easily angered. But if today, in a moment of rage, you choose silence, then you're no longer entirely the same person. You've just rewritten a line in your inner self-description. And if you do that again tomorrow, and again the day after the new version of you begins to take shape, not through theory, not through promises, but through repeated, deliberate actions. That is what Stoic philosophy emphasizes. Identity is not shaped by thoughts, but by trained behavior. Identity is not something you declare. It's something you prove through daily choices, especially when no one's watching. And the scariest thing isn't that others misunderstand you. It's that you may be defining yourself wrong through small compromises, quiet surrenders, and repeated behaviors that become so familiar you no longer notice them. You don't need to shout for the world to see who you are. You just need to act with enough consistency that no one mistakes you for the weaker version you once were. Marcus Aurelius didn't write to build a reputation. He wrote to reshape his own mind, to turn each journal entry into a commitment to a chosen way of life. Every right action is a brick in the identity you're building. And every time you choose the easy path, the wrong move, or betray your principles, it leaves a crack in the structure you're creating. You're never standing still. Everything you do is either reinforcing or undermining the identity you aim to live by. You may not notice, but when you say, "I can't, I'm not good enough, this isn't for me," you're drawing a boundary for your identity. And then you act in ways that match that definition, even if it's outdated, mistaken, or rooted in unresolved failures. But if you begin to do the opposite, start behaving like someone who can, someone who's capable, someone who belongs, then slowly, your brain starts recording a new identity. No need for declarations, just action. You don't need to change your whole life in a day. You just need one small act, repeated with clear intent. That act is a message to yourself. I'm no longer the person who gives up. And every day, you reinforce that message through action, not empty promises. Slowly, you'll stop trying to believe in yourself. You will become someone you can believe in. No one can hand you your identity. No one can define you forever. Every action you choose is silently answering the question, who am I? And if you answer it often enough with the right behaviors, you won't need reminders. Life will reflect back who you are not through a mirror, but through the consequences your hands have built. 9. Structure is the backbone of self-respect. Modern people have too many choices but lack a spine. They want freedom, yet let their minds drift anchorless. They want discipline, yet refuse to build even a small system to support themselves. They speak of self-respect, confidence, and personal value, but don't see that all of it is fruit. The root is structure. And if you don't build a strong life structure, everything else is temporary inspiration. A person without structure, no matter how smart, will constantly negotiate with themselves. Every morning, they'll have to decide from scratch what to do, when to do it, how to do it. Mental exhaustion piles up, not because the work is too heavy, but because there's no clear framework to hold it. You can't respect yourself if you can't keep promises to yourself. And you can't keep promises if your life lacks a clear structure to anchor your mind. Structure is not a prison. It's the foundation for real freedom. A person with structure is not thrown off by circumstances. They know what to do, when to do it, and they stick to it not out of force, but out of understanding. Without inner order, you'll always live by someone else's. Marcus Aurelius called it the inner fortress, the place you retreat to when the outside world is chaos. And structure is the first set of bricks that builds that fortress. You don't need a perfect schedule. You need a rhythm you can maintain, a few rules you don't break, a few boundaries you won't compromise, a few commitments you don't escape. When you live this way long enough, self-respect doesn't need praise. It will grow quietly like a night watchman, calm and unnoticed, standing firm without applause. Some people always doubt their worth, but the problem isn't belief. It's the absence of structure. No one respects themselves while in constant disorder. No one believes in themselves while acting impulsively. And no one can maintain inner value if there's no framework to carry that value into daily life. You want to stand strong in a chaotic world? Begin within, not with promises, but with structure, not with inspiration, but with principles, because structure is the backbone. And if you have no spine, you'll collapse, even while living a life that appears free. 10. Silence is where success begins to grow. There are phases in life when every effort happens in silence. No one sees it, no one praises it. There are no spotlights, no one asks how you're doing. There's only you and the small actions you repeat, day after day. And within that quiet space, if you are patient enough, aware enough, and calm enough, you will start to hear what the world always tries to drown out, the sound of your own growth. True success doesn't grow under applause. It grows in darkness. Like a sprout buried in soil, unseen, unforced, yet quietly pushing its roots downward. It doesn't need recognition. It needs time, stability, and silence that isn't disturbed. Your life is no different. If you are always busy proving yourself, you won't be present enough to nourish yourself. And if you don't learn how to work in quiet, you'll always rely on applause to continue. We live in an age where people are afraid of silence. They fill every gap with music, videos, messages, content, chatter. They mistake silence for loneliness, mistake stillness for failure. But those who go far have all walked through the land of silence, where there is no guide, no recognition, only quiet choices stacking upon each other to create irreversible change. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Work like a river quietly, constantly, without needing anyone to know." That is the nature of a mature mind. They don't need to be seen to know they have value. They don't need instant validation to continue their chosen path. All they need is solitude and a reason clear enough to keep acting. It is in silence that the reason becomes refined. It is in solitude that value is tested. Silence is the place free from distraction. It is where you don't need to impress, you just need to be real. And when you're real with yourself, no more pretending, no more performing, no more trying to look like you're making progress. You begin to walk true. Not fast, not flashy, not loud, but steady. And one day, when the world finally notices, you've already gone farther than anyone who started with noise. Don't fear silence. Fear what you have to face when the noise can no longer shield you. If you can overcome that fear, you'll discover something only silence can give. The true foundation of a success that cannot be broken because it depends on no one's gaze. It was grown quietly in the very silence you once tried to avoid. I used to think that to change my life, I needed a major event, a powerful push, a milestone where everything would be different from then on. But the more I lived, the more I realized what truly changes us is not the dramatic moments, but the silent decisions no one sees. Like waking up just a bit earlier, working in quiet, rejecting delay, turning off one more familiar excuse. I used to live by inspiration. I worked when it came. I stopped when it disappeared. And I used to blame myself for not having enough willpower. But the truth is, no one stays strong forever. What we need isn't strength, but a life system that keeps us going, even on the weak days. When I rebuilt my structure simple, repeated, intentional, I realized that self-respect doesn't come from feelings. It comes from how you act when no one is looking. There are changes no one claps for, no one mentions, but you know. You know clearly that you're moving forward slow, quiet, but sure. And that feeling, that quiet, knowing that you are no longer who you used to be, is the most powerful strength I've ever experienced in life. If you've found value in these reflections, please like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future content. But above all, keep one thing with you, even if it's small, and apply it tomorrow. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Begin before you feel ready. Because true success never shouts. It only nods when you are quiet enough to hear it. See you in the next video.